I never thought I'd be one of the guys sharing their story here. When you hear about things like this, you think it won't happen to you. I guess everyone does. But here I am, staring at the screen, fingers hovering over the keys, wondering where to start. It's weird. I always thought that I had things under control, that I was careful enough, aware enough, but I was wrong. Before I get too deep into this, let me introduce myself. My name's David Evans, 32 years old. I work as a project manager at a mid-sized tech firm in downtown Chicago. It's not a bad job, but it's the kind of work that eats up your hours without you realizing it. I'm usually stuck in meetings or trying to fix problems, and I guess it was during those times that everything started slipping. Then there's Rachel, 30, a freelance graphic designer. She worked from home, set her own hours, and made more money than I did most of the time. She always had that freedom. Maybe that's what I liked about her at first. We met through a mutual friend at a party about 5 years ago. Things started fast between us. Within 6 months, we'd moved in together. After a year, we were talking about marriage. Or rather, I was. Rachel liked to keep things open-ended. She said she wasn't in a rush. I thought that was fine at the time. I liked that she was independent. Looking back now, maybe that was my first mistake. It's funny how you can miss the small things, the little signs that tell you something's wrong. At first, I didn't think much of it. Rachel was spending more time away from home, taking on extra work, meeting clients at coffee shops or traveling for design conferences. I trusted her. We'd been together long enough that I didn't feel the need to question it. I figured she was just busy. But things started to feel off. She wasn't as present. Our conversations grew shorter. She'd come home late, tired, and head straight to bed without saying much. I'd ask her about her day, and I'd get one-word answers in return. Fine. Busy. Tiring. I told myself it was just a phase. People get busy, relationships hit rough patches. It happens, but the feeling in my gut was hard to shake. One night, she was out again, saying she had a late meeting with a client about a new project. I didn't think much of it, but something gnawed at me. It was one of those nights where the air feels heavy, and you can't settle into anything. I tried to distract myself, flipping through channels on the TV, but my mind kept wandering back to her. I don't know why I decided to check her laptop that night. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was the feeling that something just wasn't adding up. Rachel was always careful about her stuff, but she'd left it open on the coffee table, the screen glowing faintly. I sat down, opened it up, and started clicking through her emails. First, it was all work stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary. A few invoices, some design drafts, client feedback. But then I saw a name pop up more than once. Ethan. I didn't know any Ethan. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on one of the emails. It was short, just a few lines, but the tone was different, more personal. I scrolled through their conversation, and things started to become clearer, each message a little more casual, more flirty than the last. By the time I reached the bottom, my stomach twisted. They'd been talking for months. I sat back, staring at the screen, the words blurring together. A cold, sinking feeling washed over me. This wasn't just a work thing. It was personal, very personal. Still, I tried to convince myself that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe it was just some kind of weird professional relationship I didn't understand. But deep down, I knew something was going on. I scrolled up again, this time looking at the attachments. Photos, meeting spots, dates. That night, she was supposed to be meeting a client. She wasn't meeting just any client. She was with him. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for what felt like hours. My mind ran through 100 different thoughts, none of them making much sense. Was this some sort of mistake? How long had this been going on? Why hadn't I noticed sooner? Could have called her right then. I could have asked her what was going on, but I didn't. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started planning. The next few days, I acted normal. I went to work, came home, and smiled when she walked through the door like nothing had changed. But every time I looked at her, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was seeing a stranger, someone I didn't really know. I needed more than just a few emails to confirm what I suspected, so I started watching, listening, paying attention to every move she made. That's when I realized how much I'd been ignoring. The texts she'd send late at night, claiming they were about work. The way she'd smile at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. How distant she'd become, not just physically but emotionally. It was all starting to click into place. About a week later, I decided to follow her. She said she was meeting a client for dinner, and I told her I'd be working late at the office. But instead, I left early and trailed her car across town, watching as she pulled into the parking lot of some fancy restaurant. Sure enough, he was waiting for her at the door. I sat there for a long time, staring at them through the windshield, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know what I expected to feel. Anger, sadness, betrayal. But instead, I just felt nothing. It was like I'd already seen enough, and this was just confirmation. They went inside, and I could have followed them in, made a scene, called her out right there in front of everyone. But I didn't. I waited. I wanted to see how far she'd go. When she got home later that night, I was sitting on the couch, waiting for her. She didn't seem surprised, just tired, like she'd had a long day. She kissed me on the cheek, asked me how work was, and went to bed. I stayed up the rest of the night, thinking about what I'd seen, what I knew, the lies, the betrayal, all of it. I could have confronted her then, but I wasn't ready. I needed more time. Time to figure out what to do. Time to plan my next move. Because this wasn't over yet. After that night, things felt different. Not because of anything Rachel said or did. She still acted like everything was normal. But I was different. I saw her in a new light, and everything about our relationship began to feel like a lie. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I spent the next few weeks observing. It was hard, pretending like everything was okay, knowing full well that she was sneaking around with someone else. Every time she kissed me goodbye or told me she loved me, it felt like an insult. But I kept my composure, biding my time, gathering more proof. That's when I made my first mistake. I got obsessed. I started checking her phone when she wasn't looking. I'd wait until she was in the shower or asleep, then quietly unlock it and scroll through her messages, hoping to find something more. But Rachel wasn't stupid. She didn't leave much on her phone. Most of the texts between her and Ethan were brief or innocuous, just enough to keep suspicion at bay. She was smart about covering her tracks, but not smart enough. A few times I caught snippets of their plans. Late-night meetups, lunch dates when I was at work. She'd always have an excuse ready, but now I knew the truth behind them. I started following her more often. Whenever she had a meeting or needed to pick up supplies, I'd discreetly follow her across town, watching from a distance as she met up with him. Once I saw them leave a hotel together. That one stung. A lot. I felt like I was living in a parallel universe, one where the person I trusted most was living a double life right under my nose. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. How could I not see this coming? But here's the thing. I didn't just want to catch her in the act. That was too easy. I wanted to make her realize what she'd done. Make her feel the same sense of betrayal that I was feeling. I wasn't just going to walk away. No, I wanted something bigger than that. I wanted her to regret every choice she made. I started planning my revenge. The first step was creating distance. I couldn't let her think that I knew. If she got suspicious, she'd cover her tracks even more, maybe even end the affair altogether, and that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to draw her in, to let her think she was in control. So I started pulling back, slowly. I'd spend more time at work, make excuses to go out with friends, and act like I was distracted by other things. It wasn't hard. Rachel barely seemed to notice the shift. If anything, she seemed relieved. The less attention I paid to her, the more time she had to spend with him. But I wasn't just pulling away emotionally. I started making subtle changes around the house. Little things that she wouldn't notice right away. I moved some of my stuff out of our shared closet, began sleeping on the far side of the bed, and stopped initiating any kind of physical contact. I wanted her to feel the space growing between us without knowing why. She didn't ask any questions. That hurt, in a way. I thought she might notice that I was pulling away, that maybe she'd feel some kind of guilt or discomfort. But she didn't. She just carried on with her affair like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. That's when I knew I was dealing with someone different. Rachel wasn't just cheating. She was living an entirely separate life, and I was no longer a part of it. The realization hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was disgusted. I kept digging for more information, trying to figure out how long this had been going on and how deep it went. One night, I got lucky. Rachel left her email open again, and this time, I found a long chain of messages between her and Ethan. They'd been planning a weekend getaway, something they'd apparently done more than once. He talked about how much he missed her, how he couldn't wait to spend more time with her, and how their little secret made everything more exciting. But that wasn't the worst part. Buried in those emails was a conversation that shattered everything I thought I knew. Rachel wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to leave me. In one of the emails, she told Ethan that she was waiting for the right time to break things off with me, that she didn't want to make it messy, but she needed to figure out the financials first. She said she felt guilty, but she knew it was the right thing to do, that she deserved to be happy. The part that got me, she said she was worried about me, that she didn't want me to get hurt, but she needed to follow her heart. Follow her heart. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. I couldn't believe what I was reading. She was planning to leave me, but only when it was convenient for her. When it wouldn't mess up her life too much. When it was financially safe for her to walk away. I was just collateral damage. Problem to be dealt with later. The rage I felt in that moment was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the betrayal, the lies, the way she was calculating every move while pretending to be someone she wasn't. But I didn't let it show. Not yet. I knew I had to be smart about this. I couldn't confront her in the heat of the moment. If I blew up, if I acted on impulse, she'd just twist things around, play the victim, and find a way to make me look like the bad guy. No, I needed to stay calm. I needed to make her think she still had control. That's when I started putting my plan into action. The first thing I did was meet with a lawyer. I wasn't about to let her walk away with everything, not after what she'd done. I needed to protect myself, make sure that when the time came, I'd be in control of the situation. The lawyer was good. She laid out my options and helped me figure out the best way to move forward without tipping Rachel off. I also started moving money around, quietly, nothing too drastic, just small amounts here and there. I opened a separate account, one Rachel didn't know about, and started diverting some of my paychecks into it. I didn't want her to have access to everything when things finally blew up. The next step was finding a way to catch her in the act, in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. The emails were good, but I needed more. I needed something concrete, something that would leave no doubt in anyone's mind, especially hers. So, I hired a private investigator. It felt weird at first, paying someone to follow my girlfriend around, but I knew it was the only way to get the proof I needed. The investigator was thorough, discreet, and within a week he had everything I could have asked for. Photos, videos, timestamps. Every lie Rachel had told me was now documented in black and white. She wasn't just cheating on me with Ethan. She'd been seeing him for months, lying to my face the entire time. They weren't just meeting up for dinner or coffee. They were spending entire weekends together, staying at hotels, going on trips I didn't even know about. One of the photos he sent me showed them at a beach resort, laughing together like they didn't have a care in the world. I'd spent that same weekend at my brother's wedding, alone, telling everyone that Rachel couldn't make it because of work. It was surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold, someone else's relationship crumble. But it was mine. It was all mine. With all the evidence I needed in hand, I started preparing for the final step. I played my part long enough. I'd let her think she was getting away with it, let her believe that I was oblivious. But that was about to change. I didn't want to just end things. I wanted her to feel it, to understand what she'd done, and to know that I wasn't some clueless fool she could walk all over. I wanted her to regret every choice she'd made. The night I decided to confront her, I made sure everything was perfect. I set the stage. She had no idea what was coming. I'd made reservations at the same restaurant where she'd met Ethan the first time I followed her. I thought it was poetic, in a way. The place where it all started would be the place where it all ended. But I didn't go in guns blazing. I played it cool, calm, like it was just another date night. I wanted her to relax, to let her guard down. And she did. She smiled at me across the table, made small talk, and even reached for my hand at one point. That's when I knew it was time. I slid the folder across the table, the one filled with all the photos, the emails, the proof of her affair. Rachel froze, her smile fading as she stared at the envelope. "What's this?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Open it," I said, keeping my tone steady. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly opened the folder. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, her face growing paler with each one. By the time she reached the end, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "I can explain," she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Go ahead, explain." But she didn't, because there was nothing to explain. All the lies, the deception, it was all right there in front of her. There was no getting out of this one. That's when I told her. The divorce papers were already drawn up. I'd already moved out most of my things, and as of tomorrow, she would never see me again. She tried to argue, to beg, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was done. When I walked out of that restaurant, it felt like I had just finished the hardest game of poker I'd ever played. I didn't react to her tears, didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. It was like shutting off a switch. That calm, cold part of me had taken over completely, and once the conversation was over, I left. But even after walking away, the impact wasn't instant. You don't spend years with someone and then erase everything overnight, no matter how much they hurt you. It hit me in waves. The silence when I got home, the fact that her stuff was still scattered around the apartment, the feeling that everything I'd planned for was now just gone. I tried to keep myself busy. Work became my escape. something to focus on when my mind started drifting back to Rachel. But it wasn't enough. No matter how much I distracted myself, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I kept replaying the moment I confronted her over and over in my head, like I missed something, like there was still more I needed to understand. Rachel, of course, wasn't done with me. It started with messages. Apologies at first, endless streams of texts about how sorry she was, how she didn't mean to hurt me, how it was a mistake. The first few times, I didn't even bother responding. I didn't trust myself to reply calmly, and honestly, I wasn't interested in what she had to say. I had everything I needed to know. But she didn't stop. The apologies turned into explanations. According to her, Ethan wasn't some long-term affair. He was a fling, someone she claimed didn't mean anything. It was all excuses, desperate attempts to paint herself as someone who had just slipped up, as if a months-long affair could be explained away like that. After a week of radio silence on my part, Rachel escalated. She started calling. At first, it was just once or twice a day, but when I didn't pick up, it turned into a constant barrage. I'd be in the middle of a meeting, and my phone would light up with her name. Every call felt like another knife twisting in my side. Finally, I gave in. I answered one of her calls, late one night when I couldn't sleep. It was the first time we'd spoken since that night at the restaurant. For a second, she didn't say anything. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, and part of me wanted to hang up right there. But I didn't. "Jake," she finally said, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. Please, can we just talk?" I stayed quiet for a moment, gripping the phone tightly. "There's nothing to talk about, Rachel." She let out a shaky breath. "There is. You didn't give me a chance to explain. You don't know everything." "I know enough," I replied coldly. "Jake, I was going to leave him. Things got out of hand. I never meant for it to go this far." I laughed bitterly. "You never meant for it to go this far? You've been cheating on me for months. Rachel, you were planning to leave me. And now what, you want sympathy because it didn't work out the way you thought it would?" "No, that's not what I'm saying. I made a mistake. Please, you have to believe me." "Why? Why should I believe anything you say?" My voice was steady, but inside, I could feel the anger building again. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I'm pregnant." I froze. For a second, I thought I misheard her. The words didn't register, didn't make sense in the context of everything else. But then she repeated it. "I'm pregnant, Jake." I stood there, stunned, my mind racing to catch up. I didn't know what to say, how to react. After everything, after all the lies and betrayal, now she drops this on me? "And it's yours," she added, her voice still shaking. "I found out a few weeks ago. I was going to tell you, but then everything happened. I swear, I didn't know how to handle it." I leaned against the wall, trying to make sense of it all. Part of me didn't believe her, didn't want to believe her. But there was a bigger part of me, the part that still, against all logic, cared about her, that was panicking. "Are you sure?" I finally asked, my voice hoarse. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm sure. I've already been to the doctor. It's yours, Jake. Please, I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We can figure it out." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "You really think a baby's going to fix everything?" "No, but it's a start. It doesn't have to be like this, Jake. We don't have to end like this." For the first time since the night I caught her, I felt a flicker of uncertainty. The idea of a child, of something more permanent than any relationship, was overwhelming. If she was telling the truth, then everything had just changed. I couldn't just walk away, could I? I ended the call without saying anything else. Couldn't. My mind was spinning, and I needed space to think. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything other than Rachel's words. If she was really pregnant, what did that mean for me? For us? Could I actually co-parent with her after everything that had happened? Could I even trust her at all? And then, just as I was starting to process it, the second twist hit me like a sledgehammer. I got a call from Ethan. I didn't even know he had my number, but there it was, his name flashing on my screen. At first, I thought it was a mistake, or maybe some kind of cruel joke, but I answered, and immediately, I could hear the tension in his voice. "Jake, we need to talk." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure what to expect, but whatever this was, it wasn't going to be good. "I know about Rachel," he continued. "I know she's been in touch with you, but there's something you need to know." "Spit it out," I said, not in the mood for games. "She's not pregnant, at least not with your kid." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What the hell are you talking about?" "She told me about the baby, but it's not yours, Jake. It's mine." For a second, I thought I might actually throw up. Ethan's words hit me harder than anything Rachel had said. This wasn't just some affair. This was a whole new level of betrayal. I don't know why she told you it was yours, Ethan continued. But she's been lying to both of. She was going to leave you, man. She was going to come with me. We had everything planned. But now she's trying to play both sides. I gripped the phone so tightly I thought it might crack. Why the hell are you telling me this? Because I'm done with her, Ethan said bluntly. She's been lying to me too. She made it sound like you were the one holding her back, like she was trapped. But she was never going to leave. She's just playing games. I didn't know what to say. My mind was reeling. Rachel had not only cheated on me, but now she was using a pregnancy, someone else's pregnancy, to manipulate me. I felt sick, disgusted, but more than anything, I felt like a complete fool. She had played me, lied to my face, and I had almost fallen for it. I hung up the phone without responding to Ethan. I couldn't deal with him or with anything in that moment. The rage I had felt before, the cold, calculating anger I'd been using to keep myself together, was gone. Now it was just pure, white-hot fury. I wanted to confront Rachel, to scream at her, to make her understand just how badly she'd messed up. But more than that, I wanted out of this mess, out of her web of lies, out of everything she dragged me into. I drove over to her place without thinking, my mind clouded by anger. By the time I got there, I had no plan. I just needed to face her, to see the look on her face when I told her I knew everything. When I walked into her apartment, she was sitting on the couch, her phone in hand. She looked up when she saw me, her eyes widening. Jake, what are you? Stop. I cut her off. Don't even try to explain. She stood up, confusion and fear flashing across her face. What's going on? Why are you? I talked to Ethan, I said, my voice low. He told me everything. You're pregnant with his baby. And you had the nerve to tell me it was mine. Rachel's face went pale. For the first time, she looked genuinely scared. Jake, Don't lie to me, I growled. Not anymore. I'm done with your games. Rachel, you've been lying to me this whole time. You never planned to fix anything. You were just trying to keep me on the hook, weren't you? She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. No, it's not like that. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. Scared? You were scared. I laughed bitterly. You weren't scared when you were sneaking around with Ethan. You weren't scared when you lied to my face over and over again. But now you're scared because I know the truth. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she sobbed. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. I stared at her, my anger simmering beneath the surface. Well, now you don't have to tell me anything. We're done. Rachel reached out, trying to grab my arm, but I stepped back. Please, Jake, we can figure this out. We can still fix things. I shook my head. No, Rachel. You broke this. You broke us. There's no fixing that. With that, I turned and walked out of her apartment, leaving her standing there, crying. As I drove away, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was over, for real this time. But even as I left Rachel behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that the damage she'd done would take much longer to heal. After walking out of Rachel's apartment for the last time, I expected to feel some sense of closure, like I had finally ended the chapter of my life that had been consumed by her lies and betrayal. But as the days passed, I realized it wasn't that simple. Getting rid of someone physically is easy, but emotionally, it's like tearing out the roots of something that's been buried deep for years. At first, I kept to myself. I didn't tell my friends or family about the full extent of what had happened. The humiliation was still too raw, and I wasn't ready to hear the inevitable questions and advice that would come with telling the story. Instead, I focused on work and tried to rebuild my life one day at a time. It wasn't about Rachel anymore. It was about figuring out how to move forward without the life I thought I'd have. Weeks passed, and Rachel eventually stopped trying to contact me. The texts became less frequent until they disappeared altogether. I guess she realized I wasn't going to change my mind, and honestly, I was grateful. The silence gave me space to start processing everything that had happened. One afternoon, as I was going through some paperwork at my office, my phone buzzed with a text message. I half expected it to be Rachel again, or maybe even Ethan, but when I checked, it was from someone I hadn't heard from in a while. Tara, one of Rachel's closest friends. The message was simple. Can we talk? It's important. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether or not I should respond. Tara and I had always gotten along, but she was firmly in Rachel's circle, and I wasn't sure what she could possibly have to say to me. Still, something about the message seemed urgent, and curiosity got the better of me. Sure, I texted back. What's going on? Tara responded quickly, asking if I could meet her at a nearby coffee shop. I agreed, not really knowing what to expect but figuring it couldn't hurt to hear her out. An hour later, I was sitting at a small table by the window, waiting for her to show up. When Tara walked in, she looked different. More serious than I'd ever seen her before. There was no lighthearted smile, no casual greeting. She sat down across from me, and before I could say anything, she spoke. I need to tell you something about Rachel. I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. What is it? I thought everything was already out in the open. Tara shook her head. Not everything. There's more you need to know, and I think it might change the way you look at all of this. I frowned, unsure where this was going. What are you talking about? She took a deep breath, as if she was bracing herself. Rachel, she wasn't just cheating on you with Ethan. There was someone else. Someone before him. My stomach tightened. I hadn't thought it was possible to feel any worse, but hearing that Rachel's betrayal had started even earlier than I'd realized hit me like a punch to the gut. Tara looked me in the eye, her voice steady. She's been lying to you for a long time, Jake. Longer than you think. I didn't say anything, waiting for her to continue. I didn't want to get involved, Tara admitted, her hands twisting together nervously. But I can't sit by and let her keep getting away with it. She's been stringing you along for years, lying to everyone, including herself. There was a guy before Ethan. His name was Ben. She was seeing him off and on for almost a year before she ever started with Ethan. I felt the air leave my lungs as Tara's words sank in. Rachel had been cheating long before Ethan had come into the picture. She'd been leading a double life for longer than I'd ever imagined. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice rough. Because I think you deserve to know the full truth, Tara replied, her eyes filled with something close to guilt. I didn't say anything before because I didn't want to get caught in the middle. But after everything that's happened, I realized it's not fair for you to keep living in the dark. Rachel's not who you think she is. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The anger I thought I'd already dealt with came rushing back, but there was also a strange sense of relief in hearing the full story. I wasn't crazy for feeling like something had been off all along. Thanks for telling me, I finally said, though the words felt hollow. Tara gave me a sad smile. I'm sorry it took me this long. I just hope you can finally move on now that you know the truth. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what to think anymore. I left the coffee shop feeling numb, my mind racing with everything Tara had told me. Rachel had been playing me from the beginning. All those times I trusted her, believed in her, thought we were building a future together. It had all been a lie, and now, with everything out in the open, I couldn't help but feel like I had wasted years of my life on someone who never truly cared. But that's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't just end when the relationship does. It lingers, creeping into every thought, every memory, making you question everything. Even though I knew the truth now, it didn't change the fact that Rachel had been a huge part of my life for years. Moving on wasn't going to be as easy as simply walking away. Still, I tried. I started putting more effort into my work, spending time with friends I hadn't seen in a while, and slowly, I began to feel a sense of normalcy creeping back in. The constant knot of anger in my chest loosened a little each day, and eventually, I found myself going entire hours without thinking about Rachel or Ethan or any of it. But, as life would have it, just when I thought I was finally getting a handle on things, another twist was waiting for me. One evening, a few months after Tara had dropped the bombshell about Ben, I was going through my emails when I saw a new message from Rachel. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, and seeing her name pop up on my screen immediately set me on edge. Part of me didn't even want to open it, but curiosity won out. The email was short, just a few sentences, but it felt like a grenade had gone off in my lap. Jake, I know you probably hate me, and I don't blame you, but I need you to know something. I didn't lie about the baby. It wasn't Ethan's. It was yours. I stared at the screen, my mind going blank. I read the words over and over, trying to make sense of them, but it was like my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Rachel had lied about a lot of things, but what if she was telling the truth about this? What if, despite everything, I was going to be a father? I didn't know what to believe anymore. For the next few days, I couldn't think about anything else. I wanted to call Rachel, to demand answers, but I didn't trust her. And yet, the possibility hung over me like a cloud. Couldn't ignore it. If she was telling the truth this time, then everything had changed again. Finally, I made a decision. I needed closure once and for all. Whether or not Rachel was lying again, I had to know. I reached out to her asking for proof, demanding that she be honest with me. A few days later, I got my answer. Rachel sent me the paternity test results. And they confirmed it. The baby was mine. Just when I thought I was done with Rachel for good, she had pulled me right back into the mess. I was going to be a father, whether I was ready for it or not. The finality of it hit me like a freight train. All the anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it didn't matter anymore. There was a child involved now, and that changed everything. As I stared at the test results, I realized that I had no idea what the future held. But one thing was clear: this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new one. The paternity test results sat on my kitchen counter, staring back at me like they were taunting me. There it was, in black and white, undeniable proof. I was going to be a father. Rachel hadn't lied about this, and somehow that truth stung worse than all the other lies combined. I spent days locked in my own thoughts, trying to process the gravity of the situation. It wasn't like I had imagined fatherhood arriving in this way, wrapped in betrayal and regret. But now it was real, and I couldn't avoid it anymore. The anger, the confusion, the frustration. All of it melted away as the responsibility hit me like a tidal wave. Whatever my feelings toward Rachel were, they didn't matter now. There was a child involved, my child, and I couldn't walk away from that. Still, I didn't know what to do next. How do you co-parent with someone who's broken every bit of trust you ever had in them? How do you even begin to raise a child with a woman who's lied to you at every turn? For a while, I did nothing. I sat with the knowledge, letting it simmer inside me, unsure if I was ready to face Rachel again. But eventually, reality caught up with me. There was no running from this. Rachel and I needed to talk, and this time it wasn't about us, it was about the baby. I picked up the phone and called her. She answered almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting for my call. "Jake," she said softly. "I didn't expect you to call." I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk, Rachel. About the baby." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, the tension between us palpable even through the phone. "Yeah," she said finally. "I figured we would." We agreed to meet at a park, neutral ground, a place where we could talk without the weight of old memories pressing down on us. When I arrived, Rachel was already there, sitting on a bench under a tree, looking smaller than I remembered. She seemed nervous, her eyes darting around as if she expected me to lash out or storm off at any second. I wasn't angry anymore, though, not like I had been. There was too much at stake now. I sat down next to her, keeping a respectful distance. Neither of us spoke for a moment, the silence between us stretching out, heavy with everything left unsaid. Finally, I broke the silence. "So, what's the plan?" Rachel looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers together. "I don't know. I've been trying to figure that out too." I nodded, not really expecting her to have all the answers. "Well, we need to figure it out. This isn't just about us anymore." She glanced at me, her eyes full of emotion. "I know, Jake. I've been thinking about that a lot. I'm sorry for everything. I never wanted it to get this far. I didn't mean to hurt you like this." I waved off her apology, not wanting to get dragged back into the mess of our past. "This isn't about us anymore. The only thing that matters now is the baby. We need to figure out how we're going to handle this." Rachel nodded, and for a moment, she seemed relieved that I wasn't lashing out at her. "I want you to be involved, Jake. I want you to be a part of the baby's life." I took a deep breath, nodding slowly. "I do too, but we need to set some boundaries. We're not getting back together, Rachel. That's not happening. But I'll be there for the baby. I'll do whatever I need to do to make sure they're taken care of." She nodded again, wiping away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. "I understand. I don't expect anything more than that. I just want us to be good parents." We talked for a while longer, hashing out the details: doctor's appointments, financial arrangements, shared custody. It felt strange, talking about something as monumental as raising a child with someone who had hurt me so deeply. But at the same time, it was freeing. The weight of the anger and betrayal had lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose. As we were wrapping up the conversation, Rachel hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "There's something else," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, bracing myself for whatever she was about to say. "What is it?" "I've been going to therapy," she admitted. "I know I messed up, Jake. I know I've got a lot of issues I need to work through, and I'm trying. I'm trying to be better. Not just for me, but for the baby too." I didn't know how to respond at first. Part of me wanted to scoff, to write it off as too little too late. But the other part of me, the part that was trying to move forward, to be better for my future child, recognized that maybe, just maybe, Rachel was trying too. "That's good," I said finally. I hope it helps. She gave me a small, sad smile. I don't expect you to forgive me, Jake, but I'm trying to make things right in the only way I can. I nodded, appreciating her honesty. It didn't change what had happened, but maybe it meant that moving forward wouldn't be as impossible as I'd thought. After that, our lives settled into a new rhythm. We communicated about the baby, stayed civil, and did our best to navigate the strange, uncharted territory of co-parenting without a relationship. It wasn't easy. There were awkward moments, tense exchanges, and the occasional flare-up of old wounds. But somehow, we made it work. The baby, a little girl we named Ava, was born a few months later. The first time I held her in my arms, everything else faded away. All the anger, the betrayal, the confusion, it didn't matter anymore. Ava was here and she was perfect. Being a father changed me in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about providing or being there. It was about learning how to love again. Not in the romantic sense, but in a way that was pure and unconditional. Every time I looked at Ava, I felt like I'd been given a second chance, not just with her, but with life itself. Rachel and I remained civil. We weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. We were just two people trying to do the best we could for our daughter. And in the end, that was enough. As time passed, I found myself thinking about Rachel less and less. The wounds she'd inflicted had healed, leaving only faint scars. I started dating again, cautiously at first, but with a newfound understanding of what I wanted and deserved in a relationship. And slowly, I realized that I could trust again. Not blindly, like I had with Rachel, but with eyes wide open, ready to build something real and lasting. Life had a funny way of moving on, even when it felt like everything had fallen apart. But in the end, I came out stronger, wiser, and more at peace than I ever thought I could be. And that, I realized, was the real twist in my story.